Level 1 Cadet. The physiology instructor slides an oxygen mask off your face at 25,000 simulated feet. The room starts to tilt almost immediately. This is the altitude chamber, and the whole point is watching you lose your mind on purpose. Within 90 seconds, you can't do simple math and you don't even notice. Your instructor, a flight surgeon named Duckworth, watches your handwriting turn into scribbles on the test sheet. He's seen 100 cadets fail this exact test in 100 different ways. Yours involves trying to sign your own name 3 times before giving up entirely. The mask goes back on. The world snaps back into focus within seconds. Now you know what hypoxia feels like, Duckworth says. Remember that scribble? There's a cadet named Vasquez in your flight who never seems to struggle at anything. You've decided quietly that beating him is your actual motivation here. Physical training starts before the sun's even considered rising. Push-ups on wet pavement, a timed run that ends with someone vomiting into the grass. Vasquez finishes 11 seconds ahead of you and doesn't even look tired. Classroom hours cover aerodynamics, weather patterns, and radio procedure thick enough to drown in. You fail your first written test on airspace regulations and retake it in silence. 1 week water survival training puts you upside down in a harness, submerged, disoriented, forced to find the exit by feel alone. You come up gasping and the instructor just marks a checkbox and calls the next cadet. Somewhere in the middle of it, you stop resenting the exhaustion and start chasing it instead. Vasquez starts nodding at you in the hallway instead of ignoring you. That's the closest thing to friendship this place allows. The final event is a fitted flight suit and a walkthrough of an ejection seat trainer. Cold metal under bright lights. An instructor straps you in, explains 3 ways this seat can save your life, and none of them sound comfortable. You climb out of that trainer and realize you haven't thought about quitting in 11 days. That's Duckworth's actual test, and you passed it without knowing you were taking it. Level 2, Student Pilot. Your first flight in the T6 Texan II lasts 4 minutes before you throw up. It's in the bag they gave you for exactly this reason. Nobody laughs. Every instructor pilot on this flight line filled at least one of those bags themselves. The instructor next to you, call sign Rooster, flies with one hand and eats a sandwich with the other. He's completely unbothered by the turbulence currently wrecking you. Ground school taught you angle of attack as a concept. At 4,000 feet, it becomes something your entire stomach understands instantly and violently. Spin recovery training is next. Rooster puts the aircraft into a deliberate, spinning nosedive just to teach you how to pull it out. The horizon spins sideways, then upside down, then sideways again, and your hands freeze on the stick. Fly the airplane, Rooster says, bored like this happens every Tuesday, which for him it does. You recover on the 3rd attempt, and the relief hits you harder than the maneuver did. Vasquez in the same training flight gets airsick worse than you and never lets you forget that you didn't. Weeks blur into crosswind landings that drift you sideways down the runway more than once. One gusty afternoon, you porpoise the landing so badly Rooster grabs the controls before the 3rd bounce. He doesn't yell. He just quietly resets the pattern and says, again. Then, on an ordinary Thursday, Rooster climbs out of the front seat on the ramp and doesn't get back in. And take it around 3 times. Don't embarrass me, he says and walks away. The runway looks smaller with nobody next to you to fix your mistakes. Your first solo landing is ugly, a hard drop from a foot too high. But the wheels hold. Landing 2 is smoother. Landing 3, you almost forget to be afraid. Rooster is waiting on the ramp holding a pair of scissors. He cuts the back off your t-shirt. An old tradition older than either of you. That night, the squadron votes on your first call sign after you describe your solo in too much dramatic detail. They land on Encore, because you apparently asked to go around a 4th time just to feel it again. It's not the call sign you wanted, but it's the one that sticks for the rest of your career. By the end of primary training, you fly the pattern without narrating every step in your head anymore. Vasquez gets his wings the same afternoon you get yours. For once, neither of you is keeping score. Level 3, Wingman. The T-38 Talon feels like strapping into a different sport entirely, twice as fast and half as forgiving. Your first ride, the instructor pulls 6 Gs in a turn. It's just to show you what your own body wades under stress. Your vision narrows at the edges, gray creeping in. You fight to keep from graying out completely. This is called the anti-G straining maneuver. You practice it like your life depends on it. Because eventually, it will. Assignment night arrives. Your name gets read for an F-16 squadron before Vasquez's does. He shakes your hand anyway and means it mostly. Your first flight with the squadron. You're wingman to a major who has flown actual combat sorties. Formation flying at 300 knots means his aircraft never moves more than 3 feet from where you expect it. One night sortie, low on the horizon, you fly straight into a wall of cloud, nobody briefed. Instruments only, no outside reference, your inner ear insisting you're banking when the gauges say you're level. This is called spatial disorientation. It kills pilots who trust their body over their instruments. Your training takes over before panic does. Wings level, trust the attitude indicator. Ignore what your gut is screaming. You break out of the cloud deck at 900 feet above the water, exactly where the instrument said you'd be. The major's voice on the radio is flat and calm. Good recovery. Debrief when we land. On the ground, he doesn't make a speech about it. He just adds your name to the list of pilots cleared for weather nobody else wants to fly in. Slowly, the squadron starts including you in conversations that used to stop when you walked in. One evening, a maintenance issue benches half the flight, and you're the only wingman left qualified for the mission. You fly lead position for the first time, technically still a wingman by rank, not by responsibility. It goes fine. Nothing dramatic happens, which somehow feels like the biggest compliment of your career so far. Vasquez gets assigned to your squadron 8 months later. He asks you, only half joking, to be his wingman. You tell him you'll think about it, then say yes before he finishes the sentence. Flying next to someone who pushed you, your entire career turns out to be better than flying against him ever was. By winter, your flight lead recommends you for upgrade training without you ever asking him to. Level 4, flight lead. Upgrade training means you're the one drawing the mission on the whiteboard now. Not just listening to someone else's plan anymore. Your first briefing as flight lead. 3 pilots wait for your call. Vasquez is in the back row, unusually quiet. Red flag arrives. The largest air combat exercise most pilots will ever fly. Dozens of aircraft in the same crowded sky. Day 1, your 4-ship gets shot down twice in simulation before lunch. The debrief afterward is brutal and honest. You watch the tape frame by frame, tracing exactly where your formation lost its spacing and paid for it. Day 2, a real weather cell rolls into the exercise area faster than the forecast predicted. You have maybe 10 seconds to call it, push through the front, or turn the whole flight around. You call the abort. For a moment, the radio goes quiet enough that you wonder if you made the wrong choice. Your squadron commander pulls the tape afterward and tells you 3 other flight leads pushed through and paid for it. Yours is the only formation that came home with 4 aircraft and 0 incident reports. By the final day of red flag, your 4-ship posts the best simulated kill ratio in the entire exercise. Vasquez, debriefing afterward, admits he was terrified the whole week and just followed your calls anyway. Back home, a young pilot under your command botches a night landing hard enough to blow a tire. He expects to get reamed out in the debrief. Instead, you walk him through exactly what you'd have done differently. He starts asking you questions before every flight now, the way you used to ask Rooster. One afternoon, you catch yourself giving him the same fly the airplane line Rooster once gave you. It lands the same way it landed on you, which is to say, it actually works. Your name starts showing up on schedules for the hardest sorties without you requesting it. That's the real marker of flight lead, not the title, just people trusting your calls before you make them. Level 5, Squadron Commander. Command comes with a stack of paperwork nobody warns you about. 18 pilots now report to you directly. Your first deployment as commander sends the squadron overseas. You're flying real missions now, instead of exercises with a scorecard. 3 weeks in, a wingman radios in with a flamed-out engine 40 miles off the coast, altitude dropping fast. You're airborne in the same formation. There's no manual that covers exactly this, only checklists and seconds. You talk him through a restart attempt twice while calculating whether he can glide to the nearest runway. The restart doesn't catch. The runway is close, barely, if he holds the glide exactly right. You stay on his wing the entire descent, calling airspeed and altitude until his wheels finally touch pavement. He rolls out safely, engine dead on fumes of altitude he didn't know he still had. Back on the ground, he doesn't say much. Neither do you. Some things don't need saying. Command, you're realizing, isn't about being the best pilot in the squadron anymore. It's about being the one who stays calm on the radio when someone else's hands are shaking. Your squadron's readiness numbers climb every month, quietly without anyone throwing a parade about it. Leadership above you notices anyway. Your unit gets tapped for an advanced fighter evaluation program. They're looking for one commander to help stand up a new squadron flying the newest aircraft in the fleet. Vasquez, now a major himself, tells you flatly that you'd be an idiot not to take it. You spend one more week walking the flight line, checking in with every pilot before you leave for good. The wingman whose engine flamed out finds you before you go and just says thank you quietly once. You tell him it was the whole formation that got him down, not just you, and mostly mean it. Level 6, Legendary Ace. The F-22 program wants pilots who've already proven they can handle the worst day imaginable. Not just the ones who look good on their best day. You're one of 6 selected out of a list that started with over 100 names. The aircraft itself feels less like flying and more like wearing something that happens to have wings. Younger pilots on the new team ask about your flamed-out wingman story before they ask about the jet. You tell it the plain way it actually happened, no embellishment. Somehow that version still impresses them more than a bigger one would have. One evaluation flight pushes the aircraft and your own limits harder than anything since that spin training years ago. Halfway through, an emergency procedure you've run 1,000 times in the simulator becomes real. It takes about 4 seconds to go from routine to serious. You run the checklist from memory, hands steady. The cadet who threw up in a T6 years ago never would have believed it. The jet and you come home in one piece. The debrief is short because there's nothing left to argue about. Word travels through the program fast, the way it always does when someone handles the bad day well. Your commanding officer starts sending the newest pilots to shadow you before their first advanced sorties. Vasquez retires a year before you do. He shows up anyway just to watch your final flight from the tower. Fini flight, the squadron calls it, the last flight before you hang up the flight suit for good. Tradition says they hose you down with a fire truck the second you climb out of the cockpit, no exceptions. You taxi and soaked, laughing, surrounded by pilots who weren't even born when you first threw up in that T6. Someone hands you a plaque with your call sign on it, Encore, the name you never quite chose for yourself. You look at it for a long moment. Then you ask, half serious, if there's time for one more flight before you sign anything. There isn't. There never is. But you asked anyway, and everyone there understood exactly why. If you made it all the way to the end, you're officially at the final level. Subscribe for the next journey, leave your ideas in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.